Guys, thanks for joining us today. We wanted to catch up and have a chat about how you guys have got to where you've got to. We've known you guys for a long time, Andrew, when you were a quantity surveyor originally and we were bankers. You were doing reports for us for construction projects, and you've worked your way through doing renovations and now doing some of the most impressive luxury residential projects in southeast Queensland and probably Australia for that matter. So, really interested for the viewers to find out how you got to the position you are today and what's made you successful. So tell me, what made you two guys as brothers decide to go into business, and when did you start, and tell us a bit of the journey?
Well, our parents were both in the construction industry, so it was naturally something we were drawn towards as we were growing up. We took very different routes though. Myself, I went to uni and did quantity surveying, while Rob did his carpentry apprenticeship. But the plan was always, once we had enough time to learn and experience, that we'd join forces. So that's when we decided we'd start GRAYA, and that's going on 12 years now. Rob, Andrew, both construction backgrounds, but a bit different. Rob, obviously you've been the builder, and Andrew, you've been more of the bean counter. Tell me how those roles have evolved into the GRAYA business together.
Look, I really think the roles really help each other and counteract. My background, starting as an apprentice carpenter, that's at the very, very bottom, and learned stripes quite early. Got a builder's license, I think, 1 year out of being an apprentice. So I was very, very hungry, grew very, very quickly, although learnt so many lessons along the way. And the lessons that I did learn were ones that really helped me later in life. And then when we got to a certain size, where we were doing a number of houses, which we thought was massive at the time, having Andrew's skill set from a quantity surveying background and a finance background just really meshed so well, and just really helped just push GRAYA ahead as a company.
And Andrew, obviously your prior role being a QS, more acting financiers side and working with the builders to firm up numbers on behalf of the funding. That's obviously helped you in the role you have with GRAYA now as well. Yeah, definitely. So that was very important, because I dealt with a whole heap of different banks, different developers, different builders. So I learned a lot of, tricks and tips along the way on what projects work, what projects don't work, what to look out for on a site, what to avoid. So that gave me a really good grounding of the whole development process. So I think that learning, combined with Rob's practical on-site experience, definitely benefited GRAYA. Yeah, look, I've certainly seen good synergies there. Having the finance discussions with yourself, you're certainly across all the funding parameters in terms of how banks want to see things, how they look at things differently, and that's certainly been a great attribute for GRAYA.
All right, so the old overnight success story myth, we know that it hasn't actually been the case for you guys. It's been a fair bit of a grind over a lot longer time than people have seen on social media. So tell us about what that journey's been like from your perspective.
Yeah, we've heard that a lot over the years, to be honest. But to be honest, we don't think there is such thing as an overnight success. It's really taken us 10 years of grinding to feel like we're really getting somewhere. Starting from doing multiple houses, I think we got up to maybe 15 houses a year. And we soon realised that to really scale and to really go in the direction we wanted to do as developers is to get into multi-residential. But we didn't want to give away our souls and to investor stock. So we really wanted to stick in the luxury space that we were super passionate about. We feel like the last few years has been really exciting for us as a business. Feel like the market has opened up for us to build a developer model. We've really found true success.
And even in that early phase, you guys were still doing day jobs, I guess call it that, for how long in the GRAYA? It was probably 5 years or so, was it?
Yeah, it was a big decision for us because we both had really good jobs. So for us to go out on our own and start GRAYA with going from project to project without a paycheck, it's a big difference from the safety net you've got with your standard job. So took us a while to make that decision, but once we sort of went all in on it and wanted to make GRAYA a brand and do these projects, we put everything into it, and we've got it to where it is today.
So Dale and Mark, your turn now. So when and why did you guys first start STAC Capital?
Yeah, look, so ironically, I think it was a similar time to when you guys started on your journey. circa 6.5 years ago. And ultimately, why we started what we do was because we'd both been long-term career bankers. And, quite often you get to a point with a client's project where you'd have a great project, a great sponsor, but for whatever reason, that bank just didn't have the appetite to support that project. Now, as a banker, ultimately, your job is to fund clients' projects. So Mark and I had been friends for a long time, and we decided, well, being passionate people about funding clients' projects, ultimately the best next step for us was to be independent and start a business where we could negotiate with banks and non-banks to secure funding for clients' projects.
Yeah. And I think even just how the market's changed really drove us towards that. Yeah, back in the day, certainly pre-GFC, relationship banking really meant something, working inside a bank. And if a deal made sense, if a client, a developer was good, had good projects, then every bank would do it. And it was really genuinely about relationships, and it mattered when you had a 5, 10, 20-year relationship with a bank. But that increasingly became not so much of a factor, as much as banks like to talk about relationship banking compared to what it used to be. I mean, now it's a lot more about box ticking, and appetites change, and a really good deal for a really good client can be a great deal at one bank and another bank just doesn't want to do it for some reason. And working within a bank, that became really frustrating because you couldn't help your clients properly. And then we saw the change in the market as well coming, where, at that point, 7 or 8 years ago, banks were still funding probably 80, 90% of projects. And we can see that was going to start changing, that the private market was going to start growing a lot more as banks were retreating in their appetite. And that is exactly what's happened to this point today, where we're now funding 3/4 of projects in the private market.
And I think ultimately what I'd like to add to that is what we do now is more of an advisory role with clients. It's really important for our business to sit down with the likes of clients like yourself and have those discussions about your growth plans and ambitions initially, and then basically sit down and map it out in terms of how we get the money to support those ambitions that you have, as opposed to when we were sitting in the banks and kind of, the other side of the fence to the client. We like to use the term where we're on the client's side.
But Dale and I, beyond just property banking, we actually also did a lot of business finance back when we worked in the banks, and I still do a fair bit of that as well. And part of that journey in our 15 plus years of working in banks and financing a lot of businesses, and that actually included at one point the QS firm that you work for, Andrew. But having seen good businesses and bad businesses, we've seen working through the GFC, we saw a lot of businesses fail through the GFC. So in terms of how that helped us as business owners, how we built our business and how we structured our business and what we've done to grow it has been based upon, just like you guys have seen with other builders and developers making mistakes. We hopefully learned mistakes from others that we saw do that in time.
So both of you guys are obviously in finance before you started STAC, but how did your previous roles sort of set you up for going out on your own and starting your own company? Yeah, look, I think having that, we're both circa 15 years experience in the bank world. I think what that did was ultimately we had a lot of relationships across the banks. We knew how to have conversations with bankers from the banker side in terms of what they're looking for, what they want to hear. We were able to reach out to clients and understand how the market was evolving since we left, and not only with the bankers, but the non-bank market as well. What we were seeing in the funding market was an exodus of bankers moving from the big four banks into the non-bank world. So many of whom we knew, and part of our background was, understanding, the financial metrics and what was really important for funders to see when they're looking at deals. So we're able to bridge that gap between the client and the funder and take those conversations away that the client needed to have. And by doing so with the non-bank market, we were really able to provide a level of professionalism that they were seeking. For those guys, they want to get money out the door. They want to fund projects that are attractive, large scale, that are going to get an audience that they want to be associated with. And I suppose what we were able to do for them and our client was to do a lot of the legwork behind that, a lot of the DD on the projects, and then basically, pitch that towards them from a funding perspective.
So it's evident your time at NAB was super helpful for your business development. What would you guys think was some critical factors to allow STAC to help you grow and deliver for developers?
So certainly experience in property development financing. We've done a lot of that, even as juniors from our early 20s. So we've been doing property development financing for 20-something years. So it's not something that we've just tried to jump into at a later date just because it looks like a good space to get into. We're seasoned at it for 20 or so years. And we've also got a lot of relationships outside of the bank. So it's certainly really important to us as a core business to have a lot of relationships in banks and private so that we can get what we want done, get great results for our clients and get that done efficiently. Yeah, having relationships with quantity surveyors, with valuers, with lawyers, which are all of those in particular are really key roles for us to have strong relationships so that when we need to call someone and say, hey, we need this done quickly, we need a good result here, and we need to be able to negotiate some sort of outcome that we can rely on those relationships.
I think part of what we do is not necessarily just centered about finance. Like we quite often use the term project team when we're talking about, the client's projects in terms of what we need to fund. Obviously, having that experience in the banks for such a long period of time, you get to know a lot of people in terms of the other consultants that are involved in getting the project's funding. We always, when you're funding a project, it's really important not to rush things, right? Because generally you get one opportunity of funding a project. So for our clients, funding liquidity is paramount, right? So we'll quite often have the conversation with clients where we'll actually have to say, hey, let's go back 2 steps because we really want to make sure we execute this. And part of that plan is having the right, valuers, QSs, lawyers, accountants, just to make sure we get it all done properly the first time.
Yeah, well, I think we can speak firsthand that we've experienced what you guys have helped GRAYA with over the years. Previously, we were talking to the major bank that we'd banked with for many years, and since working with you guys, really opened up the avenues and really represented us. And as you said, you only have one crack at doing it properly. So that advice along the way has really opened the doors for GRAYA and has allowed us to achieve our goals and to transform into multi-residential space. So thank you.
Yeah, and I think you also mentioned it takes a team to pull off these developments, which is very true. It doesn't matter how good you are at being a developer or being a builder. There's 10, 20, 30 consultants you need to rely on. So you need to work with the best of the best and surround yourself with other successful companies if you want to have a successful project.
And I think just touching on that from a finance perspective, we certainly, when we're funding projects, we realise, particularly being ex-bankers, that maybe not every project is for every funder, or alternatively, if it doesn't align with how much debt or equity is needed for a project, maybe, we need to go to a wider audience from a finance perspective. But it's really important when we're talking to our funders and they realise and acknowledge that not every deal is going to be for them. We'd certainly like them to write most, but we realise some deals are better suited for some funders over others.